Hello and welcome to the EcoMotion panel on antiviral technologies in the transportation mobility industry. My name is Roger Lanto. I'm Director of Automotive Connected Mobility for Strategy Analytics. I'll be moderating the conversation today. And without further ado, let's get right into it. The topic at hand is how we are coping with COVID-19 in the industry. And I'm going to go to our automaker panelist first to ask how Ford Motor Company is coping with this technology and how the company may have already been working on solutions leading up to this. So Cynthia, can you please introduce yourself and describe your responsibilities and what Ford's been working on?
Absolutely. So I'm Cynthia Flanagan. I'm a director of vehicle research and technology, and it's part of our research and advanced engineering organization within Ford. First, I just want to say I am so honored to be on the panel today for EcoMotion, and I think this is a topic that has great relevancy to all of us. I know we're all impacted both personally and professionally by the COVID pandemic. And I just also want to express my empathy to those that are going through especially very heightened concerns right now. To address your question, so within Ford, we're working on a variety of technologies related to the vehicle, related to our facilities, and also related to the community. And these touch many different aspects, and we're really focused on how to look at countermeasures for the spread of the virus. So some of those deal with looking at surfaces, looking at our aerosols or droplets, direct transmission routes, and even just human behavior, how people operate, especially as we start looking about mobility. So when we first were faced with this very, very new disease, what we recognized is we had a tremendous amount to learn. From a technical perspective, what I think we all saw was just an intense and collaborative nature across the scientific community. Everybody was trying to find and solve the unknowns so we could all come together and find the appropriate solutions. And within Ford specifically, we initiated a project that we refer to as Project Apollo. And this basically was an all hands on deck approach to providing needed PPE, which is personal protective equipment, and related technologies. And just to kind of put it in a time perspective, it was around March 16th when we were all told, go work from home, which is pretty unexpected considering, we're an automaker. And 4 days later, we launched this Project Apollo initiative. So there's a lot of aspects of it, but the part I think is very relevant to this panel is one of the projects we focused on was using the vehicle's HVAC and powertrain systems in order to increase the interior cabin air temperature. And this was focused specifically on police interceptors because we're really looking at ways to reduce the risk for our frontline workers. So as part of this, this isn't the first time we started looking at these kind of technologies within Ford. We actually initiated some research projects a few years prior with a variety of universities. And we were at the time, though, this is before we ever heard the word COVID-19. And so, we were really looking at solutions for well-being and just being cognizant of, people's desires. We come into winter months, people have a lot of concerns on colds and flus. And so we initiated some research to understand, what are the conditions on a variety of materials to reduce replication of microbes. So it was pretty generic in that sense. But then, going back, so March 2020, when, COVID-19 hit, and we're like, okay, how do we pivot this work? How do we shift this? And so we took a three-prong approach to doing that. So we first were looking at the materials, what are on the surfaces, And this is before we had a lot of information to know how the virus was transmitted. I know personally, I was ordering groceries, leaving them in my garage, not sure, how this, it would impact us. The second is we were looking at a variety of external conditions, such as temperature and UV light, and saying, is that something that we could use? And then the third is we started doing a lot of modeling, especially around aerosols. And so I'd have to say this is one of those proud moments in your career where you look at a whole team of people and the whole scientific community just being so focused on this emerging area and being so cooperative. I think it's really outstanding, and it really speaks to what we can accomplish all together.
Are you working in the office yet?
No, so we have select people that have gone back into the office only if it's required by the work. So for manufacturing, or we have select people going back and doing testing in the lab. At this time, we did get a couple people approved to go in and do some tests, but it was very, very selective, and we used extreme safety protocols.
And how much of a gap, because the plants shut down briefly, how long were they shut down before protocols were put in place for them to be able to open again?
I don't know the exact timing of that. It was pretty quick that this was going so quickly. They put protocols in place for the manufacturing workers, also for the salaried employees coming into the office that were needed in select cases. But I would say within weeks, they had, plans in place of what to do. Some of the manufacturing workers actually pivoted the work and then worked on some of these initiatives around this Project Apollo I mentioned. So producing face masks, producing PAPRs, power-fired respirators, and even gowns. And so there was people actively working to support this tremendous effort.
Was Ford also doing some transporting of emergency personnel or medical equipment at one point? I'm trying to recall.
So there was some work about mobile transit health units. There was the one project that is specific to using the HVAC system and the powertrain and heating the interior cabin. That was for police interceptors. And so if you recall, back in New York, there was this huge demand, and as we were asking the community, what do people need? The frontline workers really needed this kind of safe environment. And so this was what we did is some of our research work actually was used to support that project, which was to understand at what temperature and for how long you need to heat the cabin to inactivate the virus. So essentially, you had to get up to 56 degrees C for 15 minutes to reduce the viral concentration by over 99.9%.
Okay, my big complaint in the early days of this crisis revolved around how the mobility sector, the sector that I'm responsible for looking at, ride hailing, car sharing, car subscriptions, micro mobility, these sectors were devastated and almost completely shut down. And it was only a handful of operators around the world like DD, Yandex, Bolt, and a few others that installed partitions. Was Ford doing anything work in that area? Because Uber and Lyft did not really. Well, Lyft does have a program to make partitions available, but Uber does not in the US. Were partitions ever part of the conversation?
That's definitely something that, it was part of the conversation of, potential ways that you can provide a safer environment and reduce risk. It wasn't one of the Ford active programs that we contributed to. There was a great coordination going on at a much greater scale, and asking certain OEs to work on and focus on certain aspects for the community. So the ones that we were really focused on were, like I said, masks, gowns, ventilators. We had a whole bunch of additional prototyping and ideas. Some of those didn't make it into the mainstream, but there was a lot of other work going on that we were focused on.
Okay. Thank you for that perspective, Cynthia. So Yuri, please introduce yourself and your organization and describe your role, and then we can get into what you've been working on.
Yeah, great. First of all, it's a pleasure being on this distinguished panel. And my name is Uli Pachter. I work for Faurecia. Faurecia is a global tier one automotive technology provider focusing in four areas. The biggest one is obviously seating solutions. The second one is interiors. Our third business group is clean mobility. And our fourth business group is Faurecia Clarion Electronics, which is comprised of three companies that we purchased in the last, I would say, 3 or 4 years. I am heading, I have basically two sides to my activity in Israel. We have a cybersecurity center of excellence that is working and opened up in 2019. We are doing a lot of cybersecurity solutions and analyzing and test testing on our products, and then developing our solutions. The second side is being a scout for innovation and technologies, which I've been doing since 2016. Faurecia's activity in this field began even earlier than the arrival of COVID-19. We started off similar to what Cynthia described, finding out a lot of solutions that will allow us to mitigate the problems that we're facing in our HVAC tunnels with the bad smells that comes out when you turn on the HVAC or heating solutions. So we were looking for materials that will mitigate those problems. Later on, when COVID came in, and obviously, and in addition to that, we were looking for solutions for mass transit, mass market transit, because we knew that in addition to COVID, there are other viruses that could affect and could prohibit a lot of people from joining mass transit services. And we were looking for solutions that will enable us to, first of all, identify passengers that are ill. Secondly, obviously, clean up the air, surfaces, and also develop those, I would say, solutions that will allow us to clean the vehicle prior to entering it. Now, in 2020, around October, we initiated a program together with Plug and Play, in which we surveyed more than 100 startups globally in different areas, among them air quality and purification, surface treatment and purification, symptoms and also mitigation. And we got results together with Plug and Play and applications from over 100 startups, and initiated different POCs and also testing with startups. One of them is present by chance here today, which is Sonovia, which we have been cooperating with them for the last 2 or 3 months, quite successfully. We're very satisfied with the progress we're doing with them. And with Sonovia, we're testing different fabrics using their innovative material and seeing how they mitigate and they eliminate those pathogens and microbial hazards that could attach to fabrics. So in short, this is what we have been doing. In Michigan, we have been initiating 2 programs, one with May Mobility and the other with Waymo, around using ultraviolet solutions in those vehicles that are running autonomously in Grand Rapids, Michigan. We initiated those programs in October of 2020, and we're still running with them. It is worth mentioning that in relation to our plants, we have also dedicated a lot of machines for manufacturing of masks and other solutions that helped in the COVID crisis. but we initiated quite strong and secured protocols in our plants to safeguard our workers and employees. Still, many plants in France are shut down due to the situation currently, but our plants are obviously up and running in China. Some of them are back in activity in the US, and hopefully in the EU, they will be up and running very soon.
Thank you, Yuri. Igal, can you please introduce yourself and your company? Describe, I understand you haven't started yet, but if you could describe what you're going to be doing when you start at Synovia and what you'll be working on and what Synovia has.
Sure. So my name is Igal Zaytoun. I'm the CEO of Synovia. Synovia is a startup company located in Tel Aviv, or near Tel Aviv. The company is actually working on a solution based on ultrasonic technology and very specific chemistry. And this combination allows us to treat virtually any surface with virtually any material. So just to give you an example, we can treat wood and plastic and textile, whatever surface, with actually different types of treatments. When the COVID pandemic came in, we realized that there's an opportunity to use antibacterial and antiviral coating or treatments. And we started to use our technology with those chemistries to treat textile and fabrics. So actually, our solution allows us, like Uri said before, to treat fabric. For the sake of this example, automotive seats fabrics with antibacterial and antiviral material. And using our technology, we can reach very high efficacy, meaning that we can reduce the amount of bacteria that are present on the surface with very high efficiency. Durability, which means resistance to UV, to water, to heat, to abrasion, and more and more. And the solution is cost effective, and it's a greener solution than any other solution found in the markets. So we are in early stages, and Uri mentioned it before. We started to work with OEMs and tier 1 manufacturers, and Faurecia is one of them. And we are very optimistic that we'll get very good results in terms of efficacy, durability, and more, helping the automotive industry to cope with the COVID and other challenges.
Excellent. So, Cynthia, as always in the automotive industry, before we can proceed with the delivery of a solution to the marketplace, we of course need testing, we need standards, maybe some regulatory engagement. Where do things stand for these antiviral measures in terms of testing? And it's a challenge, of course, testing. You're sort of trying to prove a negative, prove that something didn't happen because you took this step. But what's the status?
Yeah, so specific to the COVID-19, and as I mentioned, we're getting information and we're learning globally every day. And so there's, it's a continuous, I would say, new information coming out, recommendations. We look at the CDC for guidelines for, what we should be doing. With that specifically, within the US, the EPA has allowed some antimicrobial claims to be made on, they had an interim test method just published in October. We're looking at, to some of the regulations coming globally. But what we've been relying on is basically data and the facts. And so there's a couple ISO standards out there generically for not COVID specific, but for some specific bacteria and viruses. And so we've used those as some of the guidelines for some of our materials-based work in general. I think we're going to see this space continuously evolving. One of the areas I mentioned on the police interceptor, we were looking for 4 to 6 log reduction. So what we actually were using a porcine surrogate virus and trying to grow that on different surfaces, and then looking at under conditions, how you get a log reduction in terms of the concentration. And so we're using a very data-driven approach to communicate that to get to, our goal of over 99, and really depends on the use case. So if you need to be, 99 or 99.99%, effective in terms of the reduction. So I'd say this is a dynamic field, especially related around the COVID-19 aspects of it. So I think we're going to see a lot more coming and contributing to how we can communicate and educate people about, some of these antiviral and antimicrobial measures that we can take, whether it's an additive that we put into a material, or maybe it's using UV light or heat, for example.
Yeah, I think we all learned a lot more about aerosols than we really wanted to know about in this process. So, Yuri, what is your perspective on the testing and standard setting and regulatory activity? You're obviously your company is sitting in the EU, so you're in the thick of things there, and the EU does take kind of a different approach on some of these things, although I'm sure the US will catch up. What's happening in the world from your perspective, from a testing and standards and regulatory standpoint?
I think that on one hand, this market is quite huge, and it will grow exponentially, definitely when you have COVID-19 as an accelerator for this field. On the other hand, there are strict regulations that are that definitely the suppliers of the materials that we are using have to abide by them, and they are quite strict. In Europe, for example, you have the biocidal products regulation. Then you have the EU 528 cross 2012 and other federal legislations and regulations. So it's really a learning process. It's really something that the problem is not so much with the tier ones or the OEMs, but more of the suppliers of the materials, such as Sanofi and others, that have to abide by those regulations. And sometimes they will take a long time for them to adjust to those regulations and bring them up to par to really enable those solutions that we want to market come out and be integrated in the vehicle. So it is definitely a learning process. I think that it will obviously be different from region to region. I don't know exactly what the situation is in China, but it could be linear, and the regulations could be less stricter than in the EU or in the US. But it's definitely a learning curve that we are following all the time.
So, Yuri, one of the big challenges I think we are facing, and you alluded to it, is the getting people to rejoin mass transit. Of course, we even have a problem getting people to get into a shared vehicle. Uber and Lyft, they're having a very difficult time getting drivers, and if you can't get drivers, obviously you can't get passengers. Your POCs or your actual live implementations with May and Waymo are certainly promising. What exactly is the solution there? Is this UV or what are you doing?
In one project, it's UV. In the May mobility, it's a UV. It's a joint, and it's a cooperation between 4 organizations. It's May Mobility. It's another accelerator located in Grand Rapids called Seamless IoT. It's us and another organization, and it's UV solutions that we install in the vehicle. And in addition to that, we're looking into technologies that will enable us to detect before entering the vehicle if any of the passengers are ill, if they have temperature. So it's also biomarkers that will enable us to see what is the heart rate, HRV, and et cetera. And in addition to that, we're testing some aftermarket products, such as one-time use seat covers, and indicators on those seat covers that will allow the passenger to know that the seat cover has been replaced and he's sitting on a new product. So it's I would say it's a comprehensive solutions that deals both in aftermarket and OEM products.
And the UV, I'm assuming you're not using UV in the vehicle when any people are there.
No, definitely not. We're using it and we're turning it on prior to entering the vehicle and after the passenger has left for a certain period of time to make sure that the vehicle is clean, but not during the transportation itself.
Okay. And Yigal, what is Synovia's sort of path to market? And my understanding is you're talking about treating materials before they get built into a vehicle, correct?
Yes, that's correct. So we are trying to explore different directions. One of them was what you just mentioned, which means treating the material as a raw material before it's getting processed and built for the automotive industry. Another avenue that we're exploring is trying to do some kind of B2C. So trying to sell by ourselves some products to the end user. We've started doing that with face masks that we are treating with our own technology. And we are selling the face mask directly to customers with our own e-commerce. And this is quite successful, and the masks are very, very performant, I would say. So we are, as I said, we are a small company, we are a startup company, we are exploring different avenues, and one of them is definitely what you said before, treating the material before it's being processed by the manufacturers.
And Cynthia, obviously the plants shut down and the dealers shut down. But in my conversations with dealers, so many dealers tried to set up remote servicing and that they would come and deliver new cars or pick up cars for service. But many dealers discovered that people were actually still quite determined to come down and see the cars. They didn't necessarily want to buy cars remotely. So this meant that dealers had to implement protocols. And I'm kind of curious to what extent Ford had any kind of outreach to its dealers or to support dealers in developing those protocols and measures to, address consumer concerns. Was there any outreach there or support for the dealer network?
I have to say Ford has done a tremendous job in terms of looking at all the safety protocols of every facet of the business. So whether that's from the manufacturing plants and the needed safety protocols there to the office workers to even the dealerships and working very closely there. This is something that they took seriously, and I think have done a fabulous job of looking at all the checks, being really cautious, not just on the cleaning protocols, making sure that the people that are coming in, don't have symptoms, making sure they're social distancing, following all the CDC guidelines involved. And I think that's what has been really successful. One of the things that we've learned in this whole process is how we can adapt to this. And it was a shock, I think, to all of us, having to have all these new norms and to go through that. And I, personally am so proud of the way the company has handled those aspects of it. Most certainly, the engagement with the consumers and the customers continues to be really the prime, concern. And our philosophy is treating them like they're part of our family. And so our concern for them is equally just for, our employees as well.
We heard very early on, Cynthia, about Ford working on this fabric or having this fabric, antimicrobial fabric. When will that be in cars? What are we talking about?
So I can't speak about any future product, in terms of timing. It's always a great question, but I can speak from the research perspective. So in research, we are looking at a variety of different technologies. Most certainly fabrics are one of those, how you can treat those. When you think about it, we use somewhere between 350 to 700 pounds of plastics on our vehicles, 700 being, one of our SUVs. So we use a lot, but what we're really focused on are the high touch surfaces. So things that, if you're coming into your vehicle, what are you touching? And that might be the steering wheel, the grab handle, just for example. And so we're really looking at what are potential solutions for those. And there, within research, we're pretty open in terms of looking at the technological advancements, whether it's, the additive you put into the polymer system, whether it's a new coating, whether it's we're using some of these external, conditions such as UV light or heat, in order to treat surfaces as well as even just looking at the aerosol part, with the filtration systems or airflow, directional airflow. So it's part of a holistic solution of it. And I'll just say that we're actively looking at it in the research. We even look at pretty, I would say, I don't want to say crazy ideas, but kind of advanced ideas looking at biomimetics. So how can we look at the nature and how nature has engineered surfaces or textures to inhibit microbial growth? And so, it's what can we learn from those and then apply within the research domain? So a lot of exciting things to come. And I have to say, from the participation on the colleagues on this panel, as well as within EcoMotion with all the startups, there's a lot of brilliant solutions that are coming in the pipeline.
And maybe a final comment here from you, Yuri, because I think we're getting close to our 30-minute limit. Are we looking at every car getting sort of a N95 level kind of air filtration? Because you mentioned air filtration, and I think you mentioned bad smells in the car, which is obviously a thing. But are there opportunities in modifying air filtration in the vehicle?
First, definitely we are testing the different solutions. Similar to Cynthia, I cannot, give you a timeline for introduction of such solutions. But we're definitely, I think, we're making huge progress in validating some of the technologies. You see out there so many startups. You see out there so many solutions that are existing in other industries, and you think that you can use them in the automotive industry, which is a very challenging environment. And it takes you a long time to validate those technologies in the car environment. We see it both in interior applications for driver monitoring systems, for biomarkers, etc. And now we are looking not only for those solutions, air quality inside the car, but also and especially for touch and surfaces, because you have such a huge amount of touch screen in vehicles. You have also the door panel, the door handles outside the car that are not less dirty than the ones inside the car. So you're looking at a wide range, and you can't just concentrate on one. But in air quality, I would say that we initiated the progress even before we started dealing with surface treatment and symptoms detection and mitigation. So we're more advanced in it. There are definitely some very interesting solutions out there, both from I would say the filtration itself, but also from materials that you can put that will purify the air itself.
You heard it here. Anybody listening to this session today, we have keyless entry. Yuri's talking about touchless entry. So that could be the new frontier for vehicle and human interaction, touchless entry. So I don't have to worry about trying to figure out how to operate the Tesla door handle. The door will just open for me. Okay, well that's my takeaway today. Somebody's got to be working on that somewhere. I want to thank these panelists, Igal, Yuri, Cynthia. Thank you very much for your time and attention and insights. And thank you to EcoMotion for putting on this panel today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.